Have you ever just stopped and wondered how the universe actually came into existence? And I don't just mean the Big Bang, but the actual fundamental rules of reality itself. Like, how does a universe build itself from absolute nothingness, without a builder, without some pre-existing blueprint, and entirely without any outside help? It's honestly one of the most profound mysteries in all of science and philosophy. And to solve it, we really have to rethink what reality actually is from the ground up. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into some incredibly ambitious source material that asks a massive question. What if reality is, at its core, the ultimate self-running computer? But as you'll see, it's a computer unlike anything sitting on your desk right now. We're going to break down a highly complex theoretical framework that tries to explain the literal mechanics of existence itself. Get ready, because this is a fun one. Section 1. Is reality a language? Okay, let's dive into this. Our source introduces a really massive concept right out of the gate, SCSPL, or Self-Configuring Self-Processing Language. Now, I know, that sounds like a serious mouthful of heavy jargon, but let's break it down into everyday terms. Imagine a computer program, like a video game you love playing. Normally, that program desperately needs a physical computer, the hardware, to actually run, right? Well, SCSPL is a self-contained language that doesn't need an external computer at all. It acts as both its own software and its own hardware. It configures itself and it processes itself. So, according to the source's principle of linguistic reducibility, reality itself fundamentally boils down to a dynamic language. Everything we see, touch, and experience, from massive galaxies down to microscopic particles, is just an expression of this self-processing language. It's not that the universe has a language, it's that the universe is a language, literally speaking itself into existence. Section 2. Beyond the universal computer. So if the universe is a language acting like its own hardware and software, you might be thinking, oh, so we live in a giant computer like the Matrix. Well, yes and no. Standard computation, like your normal everyday Turing machine, strictly requires an external hardware substrate, pre-existing code written by a programmer, and a totally separate processor to read that code. But the real universe can't rely on an external mind or a pre-existing hardware machine. Why? Because any processor real enough to process reality would already have to be a part of reality. That's exactly why we have SCSPL. In this system, the language and the processor are absolutely identical. It requires zero external hardware to exist. And this brings us to a really fascinating concept called infocognitive monism. I know, another big phrase, but monism just means oneness. Infocognitive monism is the idea that the information being processed, the data, and the processor doing the reading, the cognition, are the exact same underlying unity. Think of it like a dancer and the dance. You just can't separate the information of the movement from the processor doing the moving. In this cosmic computer, the distinction between the code and the machine disappears completely. They're literally two sides of the exact same coin. Section 3, the grammar of reality. If reality is a language, and it obviously doesn't use standard computer code, what does its code actually look like? Well, let's start with this incredibly profound quote from the text. Existence is everywhere the choice to exist. Just think about that for a second. The universe cannot just passively sit there and exist. Passivity would imply something external put it there. Because the universe is entirely self-contained, it must actively and internally distinguish what it is from what it is not. Existence isn't just a static state. It's a highly active, ongoing process of self-selection. To pull off this constant choice to exist, reality uses something called gamma grammar. Now, actually, scratch that. This isn't your high school grammar class with nouns and verbs. It's a reality-generating syntax. Let's walk through the four main components. First, we have O, the processors. These aren't silicon chips. These are active objects and agents in the universe, from basic particles to conscious beings like us. Next is R, the products, which are the actual spatial and temporal relationships created. Then we have P, the productions, representing the distributed rules, like the laws of physics. And finally, there is mu, the mu form. You can think of this as the starting seed, the initial form of totally unconstrained potential from which the universe begins its self-generation. Section 4. The universe choosing itself. All right, so how does this cosmic language actually make decisions? Enter the telic principle. The word telic basically relates to purpose or goal-directedness. The telic principle states that the universe must provide itself with the means to make and realize its own choice to exist. To translate this into simpler terms, imagine a state of unbound, infinite potential. The universe basically looks at all this infinite potential and selects itself into a specific existence in a way that maximizes its overall utility and stability.
It is the ultimate act of cosmic self-determination.
And it actually does this through a step-by-step process called telic recursion, which is basically how the universe continuously updates its own code. Here's how it works. Step 1, we start with the mu form, that initial seed of potential we talked about. Step 2, the universe grabs that raw, unshaped potential, which the source material calls telesis, and binds it into actual information. Step 3, it cross-refines the syntax with the physical state. Basically, it matches the rules of physics with the actual stuff of physics. And finally, step 4, it maximizes overall complementarity, ensuring that the rules and the reality perfectly interlock to keep the universe stable and functioning. This loop doesn't just happen once, it is happening constantly, absolutely everywhere. Section 5, Simulation and Output. Okay, we've talked about a lot of really high-level concepts, but how does this translate into the physical reality you and I perceive every single day? The source material breaks this down into two overlapping halves. First, there's L-Sim. This is the hidden, self-simulative, generative phase of reality. It's internal, it's subjective, and it is intimately connected to the flow of time. Then, on the flip side, there's L-Out. This is the output of that simulation. This is the objective, observable physical world of space and matter that science actually studies. Reality is constantly pulsing between these two states, the inner simulation generating all the possibilities and the outer output locking them into physical reality. So how do these two halves interact? The text calls this phenomenon conspansive duality. Normally, we tend to think of objects as just sitting inside a big, empty box called space, ticking along to a clock called time. But conspansive duality beautifully marries the subjective simulation with the objective physical output. It states that objects contain space in just as real a sense as space-time contains the objects. The inner processing of an object, its L-Sim, is what actually gives rise to its external physical state, its L-Out. Space, time, and matter are completely fundamentally intertwined. Which brings us to the ultimate core takeaway from the source material. By combining all these pieces, the self-processing language, the telic recursion, the dual nature of reality, we arrive at this wild conclusion. SSPL is a dynamic self-modeling language, or an interactive self-simulation. The universe is absolutely not a dead machine. It is a living, breathing, calculating entity that is constantly modeling itself, simulating its own existence, and projecting that simulation out as the physical world. We are quite literally living inside a dynamic, self-generating simulation that writes its own code. So I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. We learned earlier that the processors in this cosmic grammar include active agents. That means you aren't just some passive observer standing outside the code. You are literally made of this infocognitive material. So if reality is a self-processing language constantly choosing its own existence, what role do you play in the simulation? Are you a piece of the code, a localized processor, maybe a telic agent helping the universe understand itself? It completely redefines what it means to be alive, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and keep questioning the reality around you.